Most of all, what I heard in all of this is it again starts within. So it's a mindset thing, and a mindset thing in two ways. And belief only comes from seeing evidence. Evidence only comes from others who've done it. Welcome to the Scale My Clinic podcast. I'm Sachin, co-founder of Scale My Clinic, here to help general practice owners build thriving, profitable and efficient clinics. Together with Todd, we bring you actionable strategies, inspiring success stories and expert insights to transform your practice. Let's dive into today's episode and take the next step to improving your practice. Welcome. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about time, one of the most precious resources, scarce resources that practice owners regularly report as being something they are short of. Sometimes even to the extent that they say they don't have time to work on their business. They're too busy seeing patients, too busy consulting, too busy with other things. And so they can't give any attention to the business. Hey, so Todd's with us today and he's going to share and help us answer. Todd, how do I get more time? How do I solve this problem around time?
I forgot to put this in my diary, and actually I'm too busy to do this podcast, so I'm going to have to cut things short, if that's okay.
All right, thanks for coming. Bye.
No, that's not true. I'm completely prepared and ready for this, as always. I think this is a really common refrain, right? And people talk about being busy all the time, and the reality is that's just all poor prioritization. Often it's really poor leverage, poor delegation, poor accountabilities, poor systems, poor processes, poor personal hygiene in terms of the way that you manage time. And so this is a really good thing to sink our teeth into and get into the detail of it. I think the first thing when somebody says that they don't have the time is, all self-made people, if we want to talk about Bezos or any self-made millionaire, billionaire, they're self-made. They start with the same amount of time in the day as you or I. It doesn't matter whether that's Steve Jobs or whether it's Bezos or whether it's any of the other big names that you can think about. So if they've done it, it doesn't mean that you need to aspire to be like them, but it just means that they're all using 24-hour days. They all have to sleep. They all have to eat. They all have to go to the toilet. They mostly have relationships that function on some level, and they often have families too. So they often have all the things that people use as excuses for this. And so the first thing to do is a bit of a time audit. Where is my time and attention going at the moment? And then that podcast's not a great place to use a visual cue, but if I'm holding my phone up, you go and look at your phone and look at the screen time or have a look at how much time you spend watching TV at home. You'll often see that there's a substantial investment in those things that are just a bit shit, really. They're not going to be really positive uses of your time. I famous to remember Steve Jobs not allowing his own kids to use iPads and iPhones when they were invented. I thought that was a bit ironic that he was kind of part of probably polluting the minds of the rest of the community, but didn't want them in his own house. So the first thing is a bit of a time audit. Where are you spending your time? And I think it's important to think about there is an efficiency, a yield curve for everything. And what I mean by that is most things we allow more time than is appropriate to. So you want to put some spandex or some Spanx around the calendar to reduce the time you allocate to certain things. Then you want to get to that process that you and I call keep, kill, and combine. What are the things when we audit where we're spending our time? What are the things we need to keep? What are the high value activities that can only be done by us? What are the things that are frankly a bit of a waste of our time or could be delegated comprehensively to somebody else to do to a similar standard or oftentimes better? And so those you would kill. Some of the things you kill literally just stop doing. Nobody actually needs to do them. I remember this is in my time at the corporate where somebody came up to me and said, I have to do this report every week that really pisses me off and it takes about 4 hours. I'm not convinced anybody does anything about it. And they were talking to me and my role was as a director, so I shouldn't really have been giving advice on this, but I think there's probably a statute of limitations on this. Anyway, this person I knew really well, and they said, look, it's a real bugbear. I don't think it's useful. I've kind of talked about it before. Nobody's really listened to me when I said I want to change it or reduce it. And they said, what should I do? And I said, I reckon I would not do it. I said, what do you mean? I said, don't do it and find out how long it takes until somebody complains about the report missing. Anyway, they're still doing this report. It was like 4, maybe even 8 hours a week. It was a lot of time. And they stopped doing it. Guess what? Nobody asked where the report was. So some things you kill, you don't have to give them to anyone else. You don't have to delegate them, modify them. You just get rid of them. You stop doing them. And the world is no poorer for you not doing that thing. And then the others you want to combine, you want to mash some things together. So that's often batching like activities. So say, for example, you did a lot of skin work and you decided that that was something that in the clinic you're going to do. What you might do is batch all the procedural work because you can set everything up in the room, you can clear your mind, and you can get to just doing a day of technical work and have a nurse there just for you, have the room on high rotation, using the right type of systems to reset and pre-plan what's going to be done next. And that way you could get through more work than doing it ad hoc in between patients. So just some of those strategies. And Sachin, one of the things that we use is a pyramid model for progress and where it starts out, the bottom layer. And if you've ever started a general practice or any business for that matter, you usually start on the bottom layer, which is the nightmare job. And this is the one where I think it's the kind of entrepreneur, right? The entrepreneur, the first is prepared to do twice as much for half the return just so they don't have to do it for somebody else. So you're going to get a shitty pay. We call that the nightmare job layer, where you've got very little freedom. You're earning less money than you could if you were working in somebody else's practice as an independent doctor, and you really have no time freedom. You don't have a great team that you can delegate to. The people that you start with, we often joke about this, is the friends, freaks, and family are usually the ones who'll start up with you because they're the ones who believe in you and are prepared to put up with your quirks. And then the layer above the nightmare job, in order to get to the next layer, the thing you must overcome is you must overcome the false belief that if it is to be, it's up to me. The shift requires you to recognize that you are the bottleneck, and you'll start hiring better people and delegating and getting them doing real work that you can then be left to do the work that you add greater value to. And this, if we think about the first layer as being the color red, the nightmare job, the next one's orange, and that's a well-paid job. So here you're getting more than what you would get as a GP that's acting as an independent doctor, and you're getting some reward for the work you do that is not patient-facing work, leadership, management, and accountability, but you're not really getting a market rate for that yet because the business can't support it. You get a little bit of leave as well, so you get a little bit more time freedom. Your team is doing a little bit more, and you are getting a bit of profit, and that's what that extra return is. Then there's a layer above this. There are 4 layers in total. The next layer you jump up to is the real business layer. And this is where a lot of people stop because they look around at their mates in the well-paid job layer and the nightmare job layer, and they go, you know what? I'm doing better than Sachin and his mates. And so I feel that I'm okay because I'm better than them. It's a little bit like, this might not have happened to you, back in the classroom in primary school, you know, you might be mucking around a bit and you think, oh, there's 1 or 2 kids that are worse than me, so I'm probably okay. And then one day you come to school and those 2 kids are gone and you're like, oh shit, it's me now. So, you know, they look around and they think, well, I'm better than the rest of them, so I'm probably not too bad. But they're probably comparing, the yardstick is the wrong yardstick. And so in the real business, they do get profit. They do have some time freedom. They're able to get holidays, but typically they're kind of the off-cut. Everybody else gets first choice on the prime holidays, the school holidays. You might be taking your kids out of school for a week at the end or just before, and your team is relatively autonomous. They're a reasonable quality team, and you're making some profit. And then the layer above this is a classic Australianism. In order to get to the top layer, you have to overcome that near enough is good enough. Just that I'm doing okay. I'm better than these people I'm looking at. You got to change your yardstick. You got to start measuring against someone who's playing better than you. And so this is about, okay, how do I get to the asset layer? And in the asset layer, you have a highly profitable business, one of the most profitable. Some of the people we work with, Sachin, if we look at the sort of broader yardstick on profitability in practice, it's typically somewhere between 6 and 8% of billings. We have many practices that run between 15 and 20% of their billings as their profitability. So in terms of their profit margins, they're really high, and they have absolute freedom of time. They could take 3 months off if they wanted to, 4 months off, and it wouldn't really matter what time of year. One of our favorite Project X members is taking 3 months off this year with family, travel and do all sorts of wonderful things that they've been able to do because they've got the practice to that asset level. And so that time freedom. And then the other thing is that you're tending to recruit A-graders only here. So the performance of the team is amazing, and that's what allows you to have that time freedom and to get the high return. And so we know that from the day that we were really born and able to understand a balance sheet, and by this I'm just talking about assets and liabilities, we're told to accumulate assets, right? Nobody says to you, hey, you know what you need to do in life, Sachin? Accumulate liabilities. What everybody thinks about is accumulating assets. And so the idea here is once you get to that asset layer, then you might want to accumulate more of those. And this isn't a linear progression. Business does have bumps in the road. And so it might be that you make your way up a few layers and then you come back down again. Or when you open a new business, you go back to the nightmare job layer and you've got to build it up. The idea is that your wisdom, your experience, your knowledge means you can go up through those layers more quickly. And we usually say for people, it takes around about 5 to 7 years, sometimes a decade to ascend those 4 layers to get to an asset. It's often said that people overestimate how much work they can do in a year and underestimate how much they can achieve in a decade. And so it does take sustained effort to get to that kind of that asset layer. And people can often be unrealistic about what that is. And I think doctors aren't great at this. They're smart, their IQ is high, they're in the top couple of centile of population in terms of their academic competence. But that's not the same thing as actually making a business run well, because a lot of that is about habits of your own person and your habits, your behaviors, your beliefs you need to overcome in order to ascend those layers. And that's really where it comes to getting the time back, is how it is from my lens. I'd love to get your take on the belief around I don't have the time, therefore I can never get the time back.
Yeah, it's like you read my mind. So the part I'm wondering, Todd, is I wonder how much mindset plays in this. So, and probably in a few different ways. So there's one mindset that just poo-poos any new idea, right? That's just like, nah, that's not possible. And I talk about this, I've got a teenager and I talk about this with my son. What you mean is you don't know how that's possible with your current knowledge. Like we talk about reframing that because I think that's quite important. But I do wonder, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe it's a leading question. Like, is there an element of not feeling worthy? Like I'm not good enough, I'm not enough. And so maybe I almost don't deserve that time, even though I feel like I yearn for that time, but I don't allow myself to have that time.
100%. I think general practice is a really interesting career. You get to be really good at taking punches, unfortunately. And I think it's for a variety of reasons. We probably select for people that are really caring and accommodating of others. And the reality is in healthcare, there's a lot of stuff that you hear that's pretty shitty and you just got to reset and go again. And so you come to be really accepting and really tolerant of pretty crappy circumstances. I think that spills over into other areas of life, including business, where you start to accept lower standards than what are appropriate because your brain is trained on patience, but these aren't patients. These are your work colleagues. These are your employees. These are independent GPs that you're serving. You should have different standards for those relationships than you do with a patient relationship. And so I do think this is a tolerance thing. And it's also that kind of notion of learned helplessness where you've been let down a lot of times. And I'm sure you would have had this happen to you, Sachin, but you've got something really important lined up that you've committed to going to. Something comes up in the workplace that is ostensibly a high priority. It might be a patient crisis. It could be somebody calls in sick. And you kind of reprioritize that above the personal event or and in the end, you end up making a really uncomfortable sacrifice. You kind of trade off something that was important to you for something that became expedient. And I think that does start to coach people in maybe you shouldn't dream or ask for things because you just won't get them. And if you get your hopes up too high, that's going to really just upset you. And so what you're better to do is just lower your standards. And I just think I've done that. I mean, I recognize that there were times in my career in general practice where I lowered my standards and expectations of what was reasonable for me. And I just had to do what was needed by the clinic. And there are times when that's appropriate. I do think you need to shift out of that state really quickly because it's easy to be caught with a belief structure that is completely flawed. And so what you said earlier is really important is when you say, I can't do that, what you're really saying is, I haven't seen that yet. You've got to remain curious for longer and start to doubt and really interrogate those kind of shitty thoughts, really.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking back to early on in my days, and maybe there's a default still that I fight constantly, where in the practice, I sort of felt like I had to be the one that had to show I was working the most or the hardest, and I felt that if I took a bit of time off, people would either judge me or they would think it's okay and they would think that I'm successful oh, it must be all rolling in it, or it must be doing so well that he doesn't have to work. All these sorts of thoughts used to come into my head. And I think that used to lead me to keep myself extra busy as a way of showing, like a badge of honor. Hey, look at me. Whereas over time, I think I have developed a lot, I've changed a lot. I think now maybe there's more about setting an example in multiple ways, like setting an example of how to work, but also of how not to work, so that you've got a better integration of, I don't like the term work-life balance. I prefer in business work-life integration. But yeah, I think that evolution, just reflecting and listening to what you had to say there, I think there is a strong element of worthiness and a concern or a fear of others thinking that maybe this person, look at them, maybe they don't deserve it, or all sorts of weird thoughts, like just really not helpful thoughts that go on that then lead to decisions. Like I used to call it cape hour. So, it's 2:00 in the afternoon, all the appointments are full, and you put on your cape and go, oh, right, I'm going to open up an extra hour here, fill it up, just to help everyone. There's a lot of those behaviors, which when I now look back, obviously, if I was experiencing a lack of time and then I was opening up an extra hour to try and be some sort of hero, it was all at the expense of me, and also the opportunity for others to step into that.
100%. This is completely relatable for me, Sachin. I did a decade of working every alternate Saturday, 9 to 5. And I just made a commitment. Again, like you, I believe that if I didn't commit to it, then others wouldn't, was my kind of foundational belief. And that if I didn't demonstrate that, and I just said no to a lot of things that should have been attended on those days, kids' sport or whatever it might be. I don't work Saturdays. I go and help out with all the things that I want to and can do on the weekends, because that's what suits me. And there'll be somebody else that you can recruit that does work for them. I think that time also exists on a continuum of value. So this is, and it's different for all of us, right? If you said to me, what's premium time for me for creative work, it would be in the mornings. And so if I was going to do anything meaningful that was around creating content or building something new or creating a system, that work would be allocated to the morning, because I know I'm going to be at my best to do that. So the question is, when are you at your best to do the particular thing you want to do? I've experienced this a lot with doctors that I work with, is just restricting the amount of time they spend consulting. And then usually what happens is they maintain their earnings because they don't get fatigued. And then at the end of it, GTFO, get out. Don't sit there just frittering away time doing whatever crap you're doing that you think is meaningful. And so this is, for me, that's that time it's actually junk time. It's like in cricket, the person that's occupying the crease and not making any fucking runs. Like, get some runs or get out. Like, it's the same thing, work. Do something meaningful, set a timer, get something done, or get out. Go and do something else. Go for a walk, go hug your loved ones, go and have some dinner. Like, do something. Just don't do that kind of middle ground thing, which is frankly where a lot of people spend a lot of their life.
Absolutely. Cool. So we've covered a few different bits there when we're talking about time. Obviously, just to distill it down, we've talked about, the way I like to think of it is the wider part about time around the business journey, like going all the way from a nightmare job, working through a well-paid job to all the way up to asset. So we've talked about that, and making sure you commit 5, 7, maybe up to 10 years to do that. And that can be accelerated with the right help, of course, but that's a long-term commitment. And that's sort of the macro picture when you're in business. Most of the people who are owners are GPs, like us. And so they've been through 10 years plus of training and education to get there. And similarly, business is like that. It takes time and education and learning to make that journey. But then separately, on a day-to-day basis, from a tactical point of view, what you talked about, Todd, is really getting clear on what you're doing with your current time. So auditing it, gathering where it's going to good use, where it might be going to poor use, setting some clear boundaries around the activities that are right for you and are not right for you to be doing. But most of all, what I heard in all of this is it again starts within. So it's a mindset thing, and a mindset thing in two ways. One is the permission and the ability to free yourself of old thinking. But the other is really exposing your mind to new possibilities that you hadn't previously considered. That's really about belief, and belief only comes from seeing evidence. And I think evidence only comes from others who've done it. And so for me, that's what this boils down to, because until We have the evidence that it can be different and the ability to give ourselves permission to have that thing that's different. Without those two, we can't take the actions. Whereas, I think we go to actions first without addressing that higher thing. Yeah. Excellent. Well, that's been awesome. You now know how to start the journey about getting your time back as an owner. So you now know how to get your time back. Thank you, Todd, for your wisdom. It's been great fun. Take care and we'll see you soon. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Scale My Clinic podcast. I hope today's episode gave you valuable insights and practical steps to take your clinic to the next level. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to share it with other general practice owners who benefit from improving their practices too. Looking for more tools, resources and updates? Why not follow us on Facebook at Scale My Clinic to stay connected, to join the conversation with like-minded practice owners. Let's keep working together to scale your clinic and build something truly impactful. See you next time.